Jake, good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I appreciate it. This is going to be a fun one for me. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to swing by and hang out with me and talk a little farming and a little seed and
of course,
whatever else comes up in this fun conversation. So you are the field operations manager for what is Twin Garden Farms / IFSI.
Yeah, so we are Twin Gardens and Illinois Foundations Incorporated Company, abbreviated IFSI.
Perfect. That makes it simple. Everybody will remember that, I'm sure. Why don't we get a little background on you? When did you start with Twin Garden Farms?
I guess it really depends on how you want to look at that. I started full time in 2018,
There you
but
go.
I'm fourth generation at the farm now, so I grew up around the farm. My father was previous owner of Twin Gardens, so as a kid, always around the farm. When I was out of high school and out of college, I was doing I did landscape irrigation. So then in the winter, there was nothing to do. So I'd come in and I'd help with seed treatment stuff. So that's kind of where I started, but then I really started full-time in 2018.
Now, this farm goes back generations, correct?
1956, I believe. So I'm fourth generation.
It goes back quite a ways then.
Yeah, it does.
Your great-grandparents started this thing?
Correct. On my mom's side, my dad married in. So
That a boy.
yeah. He went after the farmer's daughter.
Can you blame a guy?
Nope.
No, I can't blame a guy. That's incredible that here we are 4 generations later and you're getting your hands fully well and developed in this thing to keep it going for the future. What was back in 2018 when you started there full time? What did it consist of back then? I mean, that's only 6 years ago now, but
yeah. So back then it was your job title was pretty much everything. So you had a specific job title, but on the flip side, it was if somebody needs help here, you're going to go help there. I've never really been good with computers or books or anything, so I prefer the hands-on stuff. So I was kind of immediately rolled into the field work. The first year I was there, I was planting soybeans, 12-row planter on 30-inch rows. So I was just doing soybeans. My father did all the seed planting, so it's kind of where I was.
The specialty seed planting you're talking.
Correct.
We'll get into that a little later.
Yeah. So it's kind of where I started.
Wonderful.
I don't know where you want
No,
to go.
you're good. But because we all start somewhere.
Yeah.
We all got to start somewhere. So the fun thing is that you weren't really into books and everything else, so you started off out in the field, which is where I think every farm kid ever started. Yeah. Every farm kid was, hey, go jump in the chisel plow. This is how we're going to, or go jump in the ripper, or go jump in the moldboard plow, whatever. We're going to teach you how to run this, and you're just going to run it all day till you get good at it.
Yeah, exactly. And working hand in hand with my father, he knew that I learned best by just throwing me in the fire. So that's what he did. Hey, here's a tractor. You're going to go to this field, and you're going to do this.
Good
I'm
luck.
Like, okay, what field is that? Because I don't know the field numbers yet. But no, it was good because that's the best way to learn for me is just throw me in there and go.
I think a lot of people are that way. I don't think it's just you. I'm that same way. It's like, let me get my hands on it.
Yeah.
Let me figure it out.
Like you could sit there and describe it to me and I might retain some of the information. That's about it.
Read it in a book and be like, okay, I understand it, but doing it's a whole nother thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's always different when you're doing it versus reading it.
So back in 2018, a lot of people know Twin Garden Farms grew Mariah sweet corn.
Yep.
Sold it there in the place, sold it at the main establishment down there in 173. Let's get into some detail on some of the specialty equipment that you guys have to be able to do this, to be able to grow specialty corn crops like what you guys do.
Well, back then we did, one of our big things that we were known for was mirai, which that's a Japanese word for taste of the future. But, so we did fresh market sweet corn, and then we had the garden, so there's a lot of hands-on labor. But then if we're rolling into the actual sweet corn for seed production,
which is where you guys were at and are at now, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So when it was Twin Gardens, IFSI was our biggest seed producing company. So they were like our biggest customer. We were producing seed for IFSI.
Okay.
So we were farming about 1,500 acres, like 200 acres worth of sweet corn for seed. And then we had the garden. So the garden was really labor extensive. When we were doing sweet corn for seed back then, it was everything's been hand harvested. We've tried it with machines, but it didn't really work out. We can go into that in depth later with the machines. We had kids that were detasseling for us, which now we have H2A labor that comes up. And just with the labor, like having our own labor versus having the kids in the sweet corn stuff has made a light years difference.
Really?
Yeah. Just because like the kids, it's their summer job and it's almost like every kid had ADD and they couldn't focus. Where now we have this crew that comes up here and they're here to work.
They're here to do it.
Yeah. They want the hours. They want to work. This is literally what they're here for. Because then when they go home, they have a better life in Mexico because we bring them here through the government program so that it's like everything is up to code.
Correct.
So I would say we've gone so many steps further from where we were back then.
Yeah, we'll get into the whole hands-on here in a little bit. But as far as like your planters, I'm assuming you got to have a special planter in order to do all this stuff, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that it's like a special planter because it's a 12 row. We started out with a Monosem 12 row on 30-inch rows with a monoshock. So it's really just a 12 row planter. And then when you're not using a row, which we'll get into more of the technical side of things with the planter, you lift it up and lock it into position so it stays off the ground.
So what is that, like every 3 rows you do that with the first pass?
Yeah. So without going into too much depth right now, it really depends on what the male split is.
Okay.
Some of the ratios might be 5-1. So then you have 5 females to one male. And then some of them that have, say, a male that doesn't shed great pollen, you might be doing 2-1. So then you have one male to every 2 females. So it's all kind of set up within the planter itself. For me, I have to actually see it to be able to understand it.
Yeah, because each variety is different.
Correct.
So when you look at the different varieties that every farmer plants, not in specialties like yours, each one has a great thing that does that plant well. Another one knocks it down some. So in your situation, you are planting male and female plants.
Correct. We call them inbreds.
Inbreds.
Yep.
So when you guys go out and plant your first batch of corn into the ground, they're all females.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So the way that
enlighten me.
The way that it works is every inbred matures at a different pace. So it really depends on what inbred is being paired with what inbred. So what female is being paired with a male. The male might mature slower, so you have to plant the male first and wait X amount of days before your female goes in. But we plant 2 males, so it could be your one male is going to be 10 days slower than the female, but then you try to keep a split. So you have to keep your timings consistent so that when your male starts to shed pollen, your female silk is out to receive that pollen. But there's times where your female is slower than your male. So a male might be really fast. So it's vice versa. So the first time you go through, if there's nothing in the field, I generally keep all 12 rows on the ground just because it's extra work to lift a unit and lock it in.
And takes time.
Yeah. Because you use a handyman jack, and for anybody that's ever used a handyman jack, I'm lucky to have all my fingers. Those things are terrifying.
They can be.
Yeah. So it really depends on what inbreds are being paired and how the planting ratio goes. But all of that information comes from our VP of seed production out of Idaho.
So that person tells you, hey, we're going to put this inbred with this inbred. This is the days that they need to be planted and when they need to be planted, or how long the difference is they need to be planted in there. So you guys actually could go out, and you guys are probably planting all spring long then, aren't you?
Pretty much. I mean, it's about a 6-week course. from the time that we start to the time that we're done. But it all depends on how we kind of map it all out.
Well, yeah, because you're going to want to have a plan going in. You're not just going to, you're just not going to wing it.
Yeah. So before we even start planting, we're planning for harvest because our dryers are the bottleneck. So our dryers can only handle so much. So we're trying to plan out like how many female acres we're going to harvest within a certain week. Okay. So that we're not overloading our dryers and not be able to bring everything in when it needs to be coming in.
That makes a lot of sense then.
So there's a lot of science behind it that goes into it and a lot of data collection, which we have an individual at the farm that does all the data collection, and she tracks it all, and she helps try and draw it out as to where things are going to land, which obviously Mother Nature controls everything.
I was just going to say, it's a great process until Mother Nature says, hey, I'm not going to rain for 6 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Now we're running irrigation, and it's like, all right, some of this gets irrigation, some of it doesn't. So,
yeah, then you got to calculate all that too, and what goes on with that. So your corn is seed sweet corn. So you are literally growing the crop to make
that hybrid.
The hybrid.
Correct.
For the future.
Correct.
So then, go ahead.
So what we're doing is, the easiest way to describe it is we're breeding sweet corn to the point that we're going to create a hybrid. Say you wanted to plant 10 acres of X variety. That's what you're going to get from us. So it's like if somebody were to go to Lowe's or Home Depot and you buy a little packet of sweet corn for your garden and there's 100 seeds in it, we don't do it to the small scale. We sell it on a larger scale, but that's the seed that we produce.
It's the same type of idea.
Correct. Just a much larger scale. Somebody else breaks it down into the little packets. We don't worry about that.
That's not your side of things. So after you get all of your ideas and everything planted, because the way that I know is you plant your corn in 5, 6, 8, 10 acre sections.
Correct. You'll
have a big wheat or bean field and you'll plant 6, 8, 10 acres of that into this seed sweet corn.
Correct.
Give me a reason why.
So to kind of touch on that a little bit, a lot of people think that, okay, so when you're growing sweet corn for seed, you've got one variety and you're going to grow X amount of acres for it. When we're doing it, last year I believe we had, don't quote me on this, but we had somewhere in like mid 50s of different seed fields. So we had 55 different seed fields. We farm a total of just under 2,600 acres. So throughout the course of that 2,600 acres, we have to have isolation for cross-contamination purposes. So every seed field has to be X amount of feet from another seed field, and including the neighbor's corn. So say your brother decides he's going to grow corn, I got to be at least X amount of feet from that corn to help the cross-contamination. Because your field corn will pollinate a sweet corn plant.
It sure will.
And vice versa. So field corn is our arch nemesis. That is one thing we do not grow.
Damn them.
Yeah. Those Walter guys. So we don't grow any field corn strictly for that contamination purpose. And we don't like to grow corn on corn just for, like I said, cross-contamination, but also corn is going to take different nutrients where beans take different nutrients. So it's a trade in a way.
Yeah, and it also helps with disease.
Yep.
The bug pressure.
Yeah.
When you move it off of corn on corn.
Correct. So our beans kind of get neglected because they're less important. The sweet corn is the big thing for us, sweet corn for seed. So the soybeans, we'll do soybeans on soybeans on soybeans, but now we're trying to rotate that in with wheat so that the wheat can break that soybean cycle. So with the amount of acres that we have, you subtract our seed acres, we generally grow 450 acres worth of sweet corn seed.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of the max that we can take right now, mainly because of our dryers at the home farm. But so you take 2,600 minus 450, say that takes you 2,100. Now we try to divide that into thirds so that we can get the crop rotation, so that you do beans on beans for 2 years. And then after that, it's wheat.
And throw in a season of wheat.
Yeah, it's to try and break that cycle. And we're also kind of dabbling more in the cover crop just to kind of help with that, where that year where it's going to be beans and then beans again, just to try and help with that cycle break in the like late fall.
Do you guys see usually, maybe you can't answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you guys see usually a yield loss in beans from back-to-back years after like wheat or something like that?
It's really hard to say because we don't have like strong data backing it up. There's been years where actually there was one point when I first started here, I found out that one field was beans on beans for 10 years in a row. And there wasn't like a large amount of fungus in there or white mold. You would expect to see white mold. You'd expect to see a lot of diseases, and it really wasn't there. But this year I think is really going to be the biggest telling tale as far as what the difference is going to be with soybeans and wheat, because this is our biggest year for wheat. And so it's after this year, maybe I'll have to come back and give you that information.
Yeah, well,
I don't have a firm answer on that one.
I've heard a lot of different things in my life where I know people have done bean on bean years back to back, and you don't see much of a loss. But that third year, they said it really drops off. I didn't know. I mean, I figured I'd ask you because I know you guys do a lot of bean acres.
Yeah.
For the simple fact that, like you said, your seed corn is number one priority. Everything else kind of takes a back door. So that's the only reason why I was asking that question.
Yeah. So as far as that goes, this is really my first year that I'm going to be more involved with all the soybean stuff. Previous years, I was mainly just seed production. So this year now, being field operations manager, I'll be overseeing all of those yields and trying to find ways to enhance our yields with soybeans and increasing our yields on our wheat. But as far as if I compare yields to your brother, we're not too far off.
No,
for this last year, I should say.
Yeah, I wasn't saying comparing yields. No. I was saying comparing yields for you, year one compared to year two. But like you said, now you'll know a little more going into the future then.
Yeah, I like I said, I haven't tracked our yields from previous years, so I don't know what the standard is.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see though.
Yeah, exactly. So like this year coming up after wheat, we'll see what the yields were because we know where it was.
Exactly. So that you'll be able to look at that and go, hey, there was a bump in yield in our bean yield after the wheat where it was beans on beans before, we took a loss, or they were right there neck and neck, or whatever.
Yeah.
That'll give you a really good data point to go and look at.
And that's what we're trying to hope. That's what we're hoping to do with the cover crop is kind of eliminate that possibility of dropping yield after a certain amount of time. But now that we're on a cycle of doing every other year beans, hopefully it won't be an issue. Yeah,
right. Well, it can't hurt.
No.
What are you guys using for a cover crop?
Well, we were going to try oats, but that's really temperamental as far as when you plant it. And we're just so busy, we just don't have the time to get it in right away. So for the most part, it's cereal rye.
Oh, okay.
And we dabble a little bit with like sugar beets to try and break that hard pan.
Yeah.
But we did sugar beets one year and just never really got the data off of it. So that'll be for another year. We want to try it again though, because you want to know what those sugar beets are going to leave for nutrients in the ground once they start to decay.
Absolutely.
But we just didn't get that data before. So it's,
just because it works one year doesn't mean it's going to work the next year and vice versa. So like a 3-year program is really good to do that. Yeah. That way, hey, it worked 2 out of 3 years. That's 66% of the time. It's worth our time doing it. Yeah. Or it didn't work any year. I think every farmer's been there. We're like, well, done this 3 years. That's a complete waste of money.
Yeah. The most expensive words in farming are, we've always done it this way.
You are.
So if we're not trying something new, what are we doing?
It's not just farming though. That's just business in general.
Correct.
If your owner or your manager says we've always done it this way and it's worked well, I'm not saying that you're right, but I'm kind of saying that you're wrong because technology is always improving, seeds always improving, employees are always improving. Just because it worked 1 year and it worked great doesn't mean that it's going to do the same thing next year, or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. And with farming, who knows what Mother Nature is actually going to give you. Last year we had a drought. The year before that we had rain exactly when we needed it.
Exactly. And this year, who knows?
Yeah.
The winter that we're having, God knows only what's going to happen.
It doesn't sound promising. Hopefully we get some better moisture this year.
Well, I think they said 26 inches for northern Illinois, where we're at, of snow this year, and we're there. We've had 26 inches.
That's true.
Just because it was there 3 inches and it melted off, and we got another 3 inches and it melted off, and then we got that big snowfall, and we're there.
Yeah.
So if it continues on, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I just hope that we get some better moisture than we had last year.
Yeah, it would help everybody.
Irrigation really tears you down after a little while.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because you guys don't have irrigation everywhere, but you've got irrigation in a lot of places where you have your seed sweet corn.
Yeah, so we have 5 pivots, but then we have 4 portable guns that are it's a reel, so it's 1,200 foot per reel, and then we pump from a pond. So sometimes you might have to lay pipe a mile to get to a seed field, but when that seed field is in such a bad drought, I mean, you got to get water there.
You have to.
So that's part of the reason. Like, that's another way that our beans get neglected is you're laying pipe. So now you got a truck and a wagon with however many lengths of pipe, and you're driving through the center of that field to get to your seed field. So your soybeans just get run over, it's not ideal.
No, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. And we have designated driveways throughout our field so that you can get to every seed field. Because when I'm planting, there are times where I'll touch a seed field 3 times.
I believe that.
Because I'll go in for a female, I'll come back for the first male, and then I'll come back for the second male. So those beans are going to get run over when I'm going out there. So that's when I try to start the driveways. Because then when the crew comes through, they try to follow that same driveway to and from that seed field. Because if they just drive willy-nilly, we'd never have any soybeans left.
No. Yeah, you want to make that path direct.
And we don't want to lose money on soybeans. We want to make money, which obviously got to make money on soybeans. So
you got to make money everywhere. It's business, right? Yeah. Farming is a business, just like going to McDonald's. They're going to make money. You guys need to make money to continue to do it year after year after year.
Yeah.
As simple as that. If you're losing money every year, you're not going to be farming in the next 3 years. I hate to tell you.
It's pretty bad if you're losing money every year. So
you get what I'm saying, though. When you guys, so you got everything planted, you got all your beans in, now comes spraying time. Do you guys have 1 sprayer, 2 sprayers, drone sprayers, airplanes, helicopters to go in? Because, I got to imagine spraying 5, 8, 10 acre patches is probably a pain in the, what.
Yeah, it's certainly not enjoyable. There's an individual at the farm that does most of the spraying, and she could touch on that and how much of a pain it is spraying all the individual seed fields. But it helps when we're already planned for harvest, so we have things spread out. So it's not like you're spraying everything all at once. But our soybeans, your pre-emerge, post-emerge, and then your fungicide spray, we only have 1 sprayer, and it's a ground rig, 90-foot booms. That thing pretty much runs every day. It gets a lot of use. And with what we do, we aren't spread out far. We're like 4 3/4 miles from one side to the other. So
that's pretty close.
No, and you
in the realm of things, that's not far.
Then me being friends with the Sasses, they cover counties. If we covered counties, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing.
You couldn't. Just because yours is such a unique thing in what you guys do. You're not like every other grain farmer out there where you can go into a field, hit it all, and you're moving on to the next. You guys can't do that.
No, so we're fortunate that we're all located in one general area. We have some fields by our home farm, and then everything else is pretty much 2 or 3 miles north. Like, we don't travel far, but you put a lot of miles on because you go back and forth all the time. So back to your question as far as what we have for rigs, we got the 1 sprayer. 2 years ago, we used drones. It was more of a trial year to kind of see what you could do with drones. It proved that it was helpful, and they could do up to a certain amount of acres. I don't remember what it was, but they helped a lot with the smaller stuff where it's like you're taking your ground rig in there and you do 1 pass and you're done. That's the kind of stuff where the drone really comes in, because then they can just spray the 1 field, pick up, go to the next one, and then they just take off. So we can send them shape files of all of our seed fields, and then it's all, they can put those shape files directly into their
program
system. Yeah, their program, and the drone already knows.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, I was driving down one of the roads and I seen that and I stopped and I go, man, I got to watch this.
It really is
that thing came right up off the ground, went right over to that, we'll just call it a 5 acre sweet corn seed field. And it just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, came over, done. The guy loaded it up in a trailer and off the way he went to the next one. I was like, man, that is slick.
Yeah, it is. It's really fascinating. It's kind of like helicopters because I'm overly fascinated with helicopters. So early parts of Twin Gardens, we had a helicopter that was spraying for us, and they just land pretty much wherever. You load them up, and they take off and go spray again. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the same concept with just a smaller scale. But these drones, they're so smart that they'll remember where they ran out of chemical. So they'll return to home. They'll get a fresh battery, fresh tank of chemical. They'll pick up, go right back to where they ran out, and just continue on. And once you have your border set, the thing just takes off and it does its.
That just seems like a win-win. To me, it does. I know you guys got to do what you got to do, but I just start looking at that and go, man, you got this one ground rig that's spraying all of your acres, but not to mention you have 5, 8, 10 acre patches of seed sweet corn that it's got to hit first or second or third, but you can't spray the whole field.
Yeah.
So you literally got to spray each section, then go back, clean the sprayer out and go, okay, now we're going to go spray soybeans. Then you got to go back to the same field and respray again. Sorry.
To kind of touch on that, you have to really pay attention to your wind as well, which obviously if you're spraying a border near a neighbor's field, you're spraying your beans and they've got corn or something over there, you don't want to overlap. But when you've got wind, you have to be on top of where your wind is at, especially with the sweet corn, because what you use on your soybeans, you can't use on your sweet corn.
Correct.
And you wipe out an entire seed crop. That's real bad news.
Because
don't want to be that person.
I'm assuming that all of your seed sweet corn is conventional.
Correct.
So there's no GMOs in it to help protect it from this chemical or that insect or anything.
Correct. Everything is it's non-GMO.
Yep.
And there's only certain stuff that you can use.
There is.
And a lot of it is early season, because once you get to a certain point, and it's only one application, I shouldn't say one application. You can only apply so much within a season.
Correct.
So if you apply half of that the first time, you can come back a second time, but then you're done. So we have a very expensive version of weed control, which we could get into later. But the weeds are the biggest thing. Pesticides, as far as moths and worms and stuff like that, we're on a schedule. It's a rotation. Once the silks come out, you're on a rotation. So that it's just one day after another field is added in and one's dropped. But you're doing so many applications of the insecticide just to keep the bugs out so that you can.
So you have a crop.
Yeah, so you have a crop. So, yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve. Last year we didn't get the drones because they just didn't have the manpower to do it. So we're hoping we'll get somebody again this year. But if anybody listening to this podcast knows of a drone sprayer, send them our way because we need one.
Yeah, it just seems like a win-win to me.
Yeah,
it just does.
It's
from the outside looking in, obviously.
Yeah,
but
we get a bad storm. And it lays the corn down, which the corn will stand up eventually, but now you can't get a ground rig in there.
Or the other way, right? You get 3 weeks of rain every day.
Yeah,
now it's muddier than hell out there. You're going to go try to bury a sprayer?
It's either that or you're taking out a couple of rows of corn. We don't want to do that either.
No, I'm just assuming that stuff's too expensive to worry about taking that out. So
yeah.
You definitely kind of want to stay away from that. Moving forward, this podcast episode is sponsored by Dan's Diesel Performance. If you're looking to improve your truck's performance, efficiency, or appearance, check out Dan's Diesel Performance. They manufacture turbochargers, fuel injectors, fuel pumps, transmissions, intake piping, and much, much more. Plus, they offer all the top brands in the diesel industry. They're located in McChesney Park, Illinois. Visit their website at dansdieselperformance.com or give them a call at 815-977-5865. Well, I shouldn't say after, maybe even during spring. So the males are starting to pollinate. Females got their silks open. When you bring these workers in to walk these fields, what is their goal at that point?
So first, it's kind of a logistics thing that we have to figure out with the sprayer, because once it's sprayed with insecticide, you can't have the crew in there.
Correct.
So there's always that challenge of trying to make sure the crew gets in the field before the sprayer comes through. But when the crew goes into a field, their main objective, or their first objective, is to go in and look for any obvious off types. So it could be a field corn plant. Say somehow a field corn got into the seed when it was being conditioned and it's in the middle of a field. That'll be obvious because field corn's so much taller than sweet
Absolutely.
corn. So that'll get taken care of early on, but what they're going to do is they're going to go through and look for any obvious off types, because we don't want that off type pollinating our female.
Correct.
And just spreading, because there's so many pollen that comes off of a tassel that it's, once there's one tassel out there, it could be thousands.
Could be.
Of different off type kernels that is going to be in that variety now. So they'll walk it, cut out any off types, and then what they're going to do is they're going to go through, and what you're aiming for is your male pollen to, in a way, fertilize the female silk.
Correct.
So you don't want a female tassel out there. So what they're going to do is we're going to send them out before it even starts to shed. You're going to start pulling the tassels off, and we'll pull it more than a half dozen times. We probably pull it more than we need to, but it's just to be extra cautious.
Make damn sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, so that you don't get female selves, because you don't want the female selves. So what they're going to do is the first pass, they're going to go through and pull as many as they can, and we do counts. So sweet corn's super uneven, so there's going to be times where you're going to have plants that are shorter, and those tassels may not be ready. So you have to leave those tassels. That's why we come back so many times. But the main objective, the first time you go through it, is to try to get 75% of the tassels.
Gotcha.
So that all of your stuff that's more advanced won't be shedding pollen before your male, or even just be shedding pollen in general, because you don't want that pollen out there. So you remove that tassel, and then the goal is, well, the main objective when you're in planting is that your timing is correct, that your male tassel is out when the female silk is coming out. You want your you want your male pollen out prior to the silk, just because then the pollen's present, but you don't want it like super far
super
ahead.
Early. Yeah.
You like maybe a day in my book. So just a day early to kind of cover anything that's really starting to poke out, because once that's out,
it's time.
Yeah, it's go time. So,
and that's tough for just a day, because if your ground's uneven, if that seed just ain't perfectly set in that seed to soil contact, if you get a cold snap one day, you could have stuff that come up 3, 4, 5, hell, a week later.
Yeah.
So that one day is pretty tough to hit.
Yeah. So it gets pretty difficult. And then really once you hit a point in the season, anything that's that far behind is not going to produce anything. And if it does, it's just going to wreak havoc.
Really?
Because like a lot of your corn plants, which the sweet corn will typically yield 2 ears. Some of the varieties might yield 3, but it really depends. Some of these inbreds are more finicky than others, and they might just produce one solid ear, but usually there's 2 ears.
No kidding.
So if you get one that comes up super late and you don't catch it, it's just going to wreak havoc in the field, because now that tassel is going to come out and shed pollen on any of the late silk that's coming out. Which a lot of that will be picked out when we're doing the conditioning, because most of that seed is not going to produce, because it's so far behind everything else. It's really not going to produce a lot. But if it does, it's usually within the smallest size. So we size in 4 sizes. We'll touch on that later. But just because it's a smaller seed that starts to develop, that'll wreak havoc in our smaller sizes. So you really have to kind of stay on top of it.
Makes sense.
So with our crew, we kind of split them off because you have so many seed fields, and once you're like mid-season, you're really covering a lot of ground in a day, and that's where this crew, their desire to work really comes in.
Yeah, because they're probably sun up to sundown, aren't they? Or close to it.
We're not as busy. Like when we were just Twin Gardens and we didn't do things more scientifically, because when we were Twin Gardens, we didn't really plan out harvest before we even started planting. It was just the ground's dry, we're going. And that's where the bottleneck was created on the dryers.
Gotcha.
We couldn't bring stuff in fast enough. It was like, hey, this stuff needs to be harvested now, but we don't have any bin space. So what do? It's just going to sit out there. So that's where things like we're spreading it out, which your normal farmer, when the ground is dry, it's time to go.
And I think a lot of them have a plan, but probably not near as calculated as what you guys are doing.
Correct. So like for us, it's go time. Like in my mind, it's go time, but now I'm already done with my plantings for the week. So I'm sitting here like, there's stuff I need to do, but I can't do it yet. Which in the long run, there's a reason that
in the long run, it's planned that way.
Yeah. But when it's warm and it's dry, naturally you're like, hey, I gotta be doing something.
We gotta get something in the ground.
So I'm sitting there twirling my thumbs like, all right, I don't have any split plantings to do today, and I don't have any new plantings to do. So now I'm out scouting.
Time to plant beans.
Yeah, but that's where we got other people planting
that's
beans.
Right.
So, yeah, it expresses its challenges, but that's where a lot of the crew comes in.
Yeah, because they walk every acre of seed sweet corn that you have.
Every acre.
Everything and over.
Everything we do is hand everything everything with seed is done by hand. Besides the spraying. The spraying is mechanical.
And the planting obviously too.
Correct.
But after that, it's all done by hand.
Everything is done by hand, including harvest.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah. And this is kind of where I said we have expensive weed control, because when we start to get lower on work, we're done with the tasseling, you're not quite to harvest, but there's just tons of weeds in these fields. Like the grasses are so hard to get.
They're so tough.
And especially in a sweet corn field where you can't really apply all that much, how are you going to get it? You go buy a garden hoe. Lots of them. And you say, here's a garden hoe, and you're going to this field. And they're just they just go.
But it makes total sense. It makes total sense to do it that way.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way to do it.
I mean, I could take a cultivator in there when it's early, but once the corn's a certain height, what are you going to do? You can't go in there with a cultivator with a machine when it's 4 foot tall.
Nope.
So our weed control is a garden hoe.
And the workers to go out there and get all that done. Yeah. And hats off to them for putting in them hours and working hard, because you guys need that.
Yeah. I mean, you really get a different perspective on these individuals that come up here for a better life. They're giving their family a better life by coming here and working so hard. It's incredible how much money they can make here versus
down
in
there.
Mexico. It was like what they make in an hour here is what they would make in a day there. So these people, they're here like, hey, I have an opportunity to
make some money,
and then I can go home and give my family a better life.
Makes sense.
So
I think a lot of us would do that if we could.
Yeah. It's wild. And then you get to really know some of these people. My right-hand guy with seed production, he's like, you almost become best friends with him because you spend so much time with him.
Yep. Spend probably more time with him than your family at home.
Yeah.
Some days.
Yeah. And my Spanish is not that great. I say I speak farm Spanish because I can get by on the farm. But when somebody outside of the farm wants to talk Spanish to me,
Google.
Yeah. I'm done.
Help me out.
Yeah.
So when these guys, when your crew gets done, it's time to harvest, right? Get into a little detail on that.
Harvest is it's a beast. Everything is done by hand. It's husked in the field. So on the plant, they rip the husk down and just take the ear, which we harvest at high moisture, and we have a percentage that we aim for, which if we hit a certain point, we will take it. But we like to have our moisture under a certain point, which I'll leave that undisclosed. It's what these people go through is wild because we can't use a machine. A machine will leave too much damage on the corn. And then the damage on the seed really just ripples down
down the line. As soon as you start damaging in the field, the damage just continues on down the line.
Correct. So we have these shivs, and I almost call it a prison shank because it's like it just goes in their hand and it allows them to grab the husk and peel it down to get to the ear. But we just have mass amounts of recycling bins. So these people, they'll just drag a recycling bin along with them, and they just snap the ear off, throw it in there. So they pull the husk down, snap the ear off, throw it in the recycle bin. Then you have designated box carriers. These guys they're just mules. They're just built to carry these boxes. I mean, some of these guys are huge. And they'll fill a recycling bin, throw it on their shoulder, and then they carry it over the wagon. And it's every acre, it's 450 acres is including males.
Okay.
So once the male is done shedding, we cut it out.
They're done.
Their purpose is done for. So now we just take what is on that female plant. So,
but they still got to cover 450 acres no matter what.
Correct.
Because even if there's only one male plant to one male row compared to 3 female rows, they still got to walk that.
Yeah.
So it's still 450 acres no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. So they do every acre that way. And it's really the best way that we can do it for our area because it just doesn't dry down. We have the humidity here. The corn doesn't dry down, and it'll start to grow on the cob if it sits out there for too long. So it's really it's a race against the clock. Basically, once you start harvest, and the dryers, that'll kind of sway how we harvest because I have to plan it out to make sure that I have enough space for the following day to start.
So do you have special dryers then? So after they pick the cob, put it in the bin, put it in the wagon, haul it back to the farm. Do you have special dryers that you put that in, or how does that process work from there?
Yeah, it's certainly not like your typical grain bin that you're used to. It's basically shipping containers mounted on an angle with a perforated floor and an air plenum underneath it. So we load it with conveyors. The wagons we have, they've got a walking bottom to them. So it's just, you hook it up to a PTO and then you engage the walking bottom when you want to move it back. But we've got like sorting so that when it's coming through the conveyors, you're standing there sorting out what is obviously not right. So if you're creating a bicolor variety and your female's white, your male is yellow, it should come out yellow. But if you've got whites, now you've got female selves. Try to pick that stuff out prior to going into the conditioning process.
And that's the whole ear and everything.
Correct.
Right in there.
Because it's just like that much contamination going into what would be the final hybrid. But yeah, it's our dryers, just glorified fans with burners on them, and it blows through a plenum under the bottom side of a shipping container, and then we dry it down to a certain percentage, and once it's done,
is that a long process to take usually? I mean, I'm sure it depends on the year and what you're picking it at and what you want to get it down to, but I don't know if that's a 5-hour process or a 3-hour process per batch that you put in there.
Well, we're talking days.
Oh, days.
Yeah, days.
Oh.
It's not hours. We have like groups. We take turns checking dryers at night. We've got one of the guys that we bring up from Mexico. He checks the dryers every night to make sure they're burning. But we have 27 different bins. And then we've got, let's see here.
Holy shit.
Like 12 different dryers. So they're all burning separately.
Wow.
But obviously it's only lit if there's something in there.
Yes.
And the way that it sits is like there's a giant plenum and there's doors to every individual shipping container. So once I put a product in there, you open the door so that you get the airflow, and then the other ones will remain closed until it gets a product.
Gotcha.
Typically, we're anywhere from 7 to 8 days
per variety
per dryer.
Per dryer.
Which it really depends on how full I fill it.
Agreed.
Which we have a max, but sometimes that doesn't pan out. Like a field, say it's 11 acres and I get 13 wagons off of it. That doesn't really give me a good number to kind of disperse it across the bins. because we have an X amount that we put in there just for our own purpose. Because if you don't get enough airflow, that stuff's going to start growing in the dryer as well because the moisture's so high. So it's every day, check the moistures, make sure that it's dropping, double check doors, make sure everything's open. But yeah, it's certainly not like your typical grain dryer.
Yeah, I figured it wasn't. I didn't know exactly how it was. I just figured it wasn't a typical grain dryer. Because after you guys get that dry, that cob down to, that ear down to the right moisture, what's the process after that?
So at that point, we'll verify that it's dried to the percentage that we're looking for. And then it's almost like it's kind of like a come along. So you attach it to the top and you just open the door ever so slightly so you can get the seed to start coming down. And then it goes onto a conveyor. Up through the conveyor, it goes into a sheller. So when it goes into the sheller, what that machine is doing is essentially, I don't want to say beating the cob, but in a way it's just knocking the seed off of the cob. And then the cob goes out one way because it goes through like a sorting screen. Cobs go out one way to a garbage location, and then the seed goes the other way. So at that point, once a bin is full, our pro boxes, then that gets tagged and goes into storage. But that's unfinished seed. So typically, like, you can kind of estimate an acre per pro box.
Okay.
Is the way that we guess for that, like the starting point. So if a field is 10 acres, you're going to get roughly 10 pro boxes off of it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. If that's what you guys are used to doing, the math works out. Great.
And a pro box for grain, like corn or beans, that could weigh up to like 3,000 pounds, 2,500 pounds or 3,000 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't deal with a whole lot of that. I know soybeans are typically anywhere from 22 to 2,500 pounds. But since we don't do field corn, I don't know the weight on that. Our stuff, the max that we can really fit in it, depending on the variety, is like 1,900.
And seed size matters too.
Yeah. So it's kind of a different game. We like to say that a pound of field corn, the sweet corn is almost double the size for a pound.
Oh.
Just because the seed is so dense, and then the sweet corn is so much lighter than the actual field corn. So it's like pretty much double the surface area for a pound of sweet corn than it is a pound of field corn.
I did not know that.
It's just kind of like a
rule of thumb.
Yeah, rough estimate. don't quote me on it. So
no, we ain't gonna quote nobody here. So after it gets into the pro boxes for storage, then what?
So there's usually a priority list of conditioning the seed. So at that point, we'll follow the priority list if we can. If we have something that's done that's not on the priority list, but there's nothing else on the priority list that's ready, we'll start on something. So we send it to the sizers. The sizers, we size it to 4 sizes. And the reason we do that is plantability. So say you're going to go plant 10 acres and you want, or say you have a 32 disc planter or a 32 disc in your planter, and you want one size. So say you get a large round, that's going to go through your planter so much better than if everything was mixed, because a sweet corn seed is like a snowflake. They're never the same. So
field corn's that way too.
Yeah. So,
you got large round, medium flats. I can't even think of the other ones that are out there, but there's a ton of different sizes that are out there.
Yeah. So, we size large round, large flat, medium round, medium flat. And the medium flats are the ones that usually give us the headaches with the later shed or the late shedding females, because that's going to be your smallest seed. So that's the one that's going to be your headache. And that's usually the one that gets neglected because, like, all right, we didn't have good purities on that one.
And we're already working on all these other ones that we're trying to get done. So,
yeah. So it goes through the sizers, and the sizers will sift out the garbage as well.
Okay.
But now our sizers are significantly faster than our gravity table. So the gravity table sorts out your really light seed. So say you might have some seed that pre-germinated, and that's going to be lighter than a lot of your other corn. So the way that the gravity table works is your stuff that's really heavy goes to the top, and then the stuff that's really light goes to the bottom. So
it's like at an angle.
Correct.
And it's got fans that blow up through it, and it shakes like this.
Yep.
So all your heavy seed goes to the top, all your light seed goes to the bottom, and they can go in 2 separate compartments.
Correct.
Junk and great.
And that's where we're different, because the top part is typically the blow-in field corn that we've got.
Oh.
So that's actually garbage to us. Which,
really?
Depending on how much field corn there is, we'll rerun what we call the heavy. So the light, that's all like any dust that's left over, that stuff's junk. So any pre-germinated seed that goes down there, that's pretty much, unless otherwise decided to rerun it again, it's pretty much garbage. Anything that goes to the top is typically contaminated with field corn, and then that is where we make a judgment call of like, okay, what's the contamination point, and how much good seed can we save from this by running it again? Everything that comes right down the middle is our good seed. So that's what kind of divides things from sweet corn and the grains.
Field corn.
Yep. So it's kind of interesting. And then we have a series of other machines that can dictate the difference between, so say we can't get all the field corn with the gravity table. We've got another machine that can actually tell the difference within milliseconds if it's field corn or sweet corn.
Cool.
So there's quite a bit that we're doing now by machines as far as conditioning, but we also have the old school way where it's conveyor belts, and we have people literally standing there picking out the obvious different, because sweet corn seed's going to shrivel up and field corn stays round.
Okay.
Like your field corn might have a dent on the top, but your sweet corn seed really shrivels up. So, because it doesn't carry the starches like the field corn does. So, a lot of like our inbred increases. So we'll do like a open pollination increase for a specific hybrid, or not hybrid, inbred. That we'll do by hand, because that stuff's, it's a little more finicky, and it's easier to do it by hand. So per conveyor belt, there's 8 people. We usually keep back anywhere from 16 to 24 people to help us do the conditioning, but everybody else is only here for 3-4 months.
Yeah, that's a tough 3-4 months.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, we bring them in phases. So like we're bringing 5 guys up now to help us. We've got one guy, he's a certified geomechanic, found that out. So he does a lot of our maintenance stuff. He works on our vans, our buses, because you have to transport all these people that come up.
You do.
But he's all around just like a handyman. He knows a lot. He can weld. He can do all that stuff. So
bring him up early and help him get the equipment ready to go for the year.
So then those kind of guys, they'll stay later. So those guys, they're here for 9 months out of the year.
Wow.
And the guy that's like our certified GM mechanic, he's got 2 kids at home. But he's here because he wants to give his family a better life. So he's here working so that he can provide for his kids and his wife.
That's awesome.
But I can't imagine being away from my wife for 10 months.
No, I mean, you got to give the guy credit. You got to give the guy credit where credit's due. To come up here and work your ass off for 9 months or 10 months, whatever that may be, to give your family a better life, and then go home for 60 or 90 days, hang out, and then back at it again.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a wild ride, and we've really kind of, I mean, every year you kind of get a couple new people, but we've really solidified a pretty solid group, and they're all here for the same reason. They're all here to...
Is it usually the same ones that come back every year then?
For the most part. For the most part. I wouldn't say like all the time.
No. But it's good that the same crew keeps coming back.
Yeah.
That way they can help. Even if you have 5, 10, 15 new people, your crew knows what's going on. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So help these 5, 10, 15 people. We're going to be good.
Yeah. So like these 5 guys that are coming now, you pretty much just hand them the keys to a van and they go to the house. They know what to do. They know what their job is now, and they're here. They're ready to work. So the last 2 months, I've been prepping to-do lists for these guys because there's not a whole lot to do right now.
Oh, there's always something to do.
Well, there's plenty to do, but there's not a whole lot to do compared to the summer.
Yeah, I get it. One, maybe you can't indulge on this, but I'll ask anyway. Once you get the seed all separated in size and everything else, does that seed stick around the local area, or does that go nationwide, worldwide?
It goes worldwide.
Worldwide.
We send it all over the place. So once it's done being conditioned, it'll go into storage, and then we'll receive orders. So say a certain customer wants 100 bags of this or 100 bags of that. We'll treat it by order. So we don't pre-treat anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the order comes in, and then we create our treatment sheet, whatever the desired chemical is that they want on it for fungicide or insecticide.
Seed treatment.
Yep. So then we'll treat it by order, and then it gets shipped to wherever it's
at.
And then the customer will verify whether they want it to go by boat or by air if it's going overseas, which we send a lot of seed overseas.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Everywhere overseas?
Yeah, it goes all over the place.
That's so cool.
So it's like sometimes you're like, I don't even know where this place is.
Well, it's so cool to think that a small town like where you guys are located and where we're located here, and you make something that goes everywhere.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people across the table from me here, and their products are the same way. It's like, it's hard to believe that they come from the local area, but they go everywhere.
Yeah, it goes
just
all
like,
over the place.
That is just cool.
And I mean, we ship out pallet after pallet after pallet. I mean, it's every day there's stuff going out.
Once it's conditioned and ready to go.
Yep. I mean, there's some stuff that we'll send out untreated.
Because I'm sure some people don't want that.
Yeah, and then you have to, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but you have to every country has a different chemical that you can use or can't use. So you have to comply by all that and make sure that you're within the ranges, and they ask for all the specifics of how it was treated, what was the rate it was treated, and you have to submit all that just in order to get it go overseas. But yeah, go ahead. It takes a serious team to make this place go around, because there's so many different parts that are moving.
Well,
constantly.
I mean, we only talked about the farming side of it. We didn't talk about the logistics side. We didn't talk about the advertising side. We didn't talk about the shipping side. We didn't talk about the management side, other than just the farming operation is what we've talked about today.
Yeah, it's pretty much just developing that seed. That's really
think about everything we've talked about here just to develop that seed.
Yeah.
That's not including anything else beyond developing it.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so it's every year is a different ride, and it's a wild ride. Never know which way we're going to go, but it's always a good time.
It's not a bad thing. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll move forward here. Are you guys looking for help at all?
We're always looking for help.
Okay.
Full-time people, it's hard to find quality full-time people that are ready to work. No offense to anybody out here now, the younger generation just does not. They don't like it. This stuff is, in my opinion, too hard for the younger generation.
I don't know about too hard, but I will say uninformed.
Correct.
Farming is a very demanding profession. Whether it doesn't matter if you're grain farming, if you're special seed farming, if you're dairy farming, if you got a vegetable farm, it doesn't matter. It's very demanding. When that plant tells you that it needs help, you need to be there to help it.
Yeah.
When that plant tells you I'm ready to be harvested, you need to harvest it. When you are ready to go in the springtime and that ground says I'm fit and ready to go, you need to be putting it in.
Mm-hmm.
When that cow says I need to be milked, she's got to be milked.
Yeah.
It is a very demanding profession. And I don't think a lot of people in this world understand that. Yeah, they look at farmers like, oh, they're out there in their tractors and they're driving around. That's not the case. It's a lot more demanding than that.
Yeah. A lot of questions I get is like, oh, you're done for the season now. What do you do all winter? Like, the chaos just started.
That chaos ended. This one's starting.
Yeah, exactly. So it's I mean, we're different than a lot of places, but it still keeps us busy.
Yeah. That's what makes it a full-time job. Plus.
And the job is always entertaining, because you could go into work thinking you're going to do one thing one day, but your schedule's going to change as soon as you get there.
Pretty quick. It's like, oh man, that hydraulic line just blew on that tractor. Well, that's got to get fixed now.
Yeah.
This can wait. Got to go fix that first.
Yep.
I get it. Well, Jake, thanks for taking the time to come over and shoot the shit and hang out and.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me.
Teach me something new.
Yeah. We've got to let you teach me something now.
I ain't got nothing to teach.
I'm sure you got plenty.
Well, thank you, sir. We'll touch base in another year and we'll do this all over again, huh?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Thank you.